Ever get that creepy feeling like someone's peeking over your shoulder scrolling through your phone? Well, today we're diving headfirst into a world where that's not just a feeling, it's a reality. It's all about the UK press, your data, and a whole lot of power plays.
Yeah, forget the flashy headlines for a sec, because this is about something way more important. Your right to privacy. We'll unpack how that right's been tested, who's calling the shots, and what it means for, well, you.
Okay, picture this. A massive investigation blows the lid off this whole network of private eyes, digging up dirt on everyone and anyone. And I'm not just talking your embarrassing high school photos here. We're talking medical records, money troubles, even, get this, criminal histories. All up for grabs, all for a price. Welcome to Operation Motorman, where we learn just how hungry the UK press is for your personal info.
And the guys over at the ICO, the ones supposed to be guarding your data, like digital guard dogs, they had a big decision to make. How do you hold the system, a powerful one at that, accountable? Throw the book at every journalist who used this stuff? Or were there bigger fish to fry?
That's the million-dollar question, right? So the ICO, they went after the private investigators, the ones actually peddling the goods. But the journalists who bought it, who used it, not so much.
And I bet that didn't sit right with a lot of folks. I mean, put yourself in their shoes. Your life, your secrets, splashed across the news. And the very people who were supposed to protect you, they're giving the ones who exploited you a free pass. Not cool.
Yeah, it does make you wonder. The ICO, their logic was that going after journalists, it'd be a whole thing. Legal nightmares, costs out the wazoo, and of course the whole public interest card.
And that, my friend, is where things get really interesting. See, there's this blurry line between real investigative journalism, the stuff that holds power accountable, and then there's, well, straight-up intrusion. And let's be honest, the tabloids, they often straddle that line.
Oh, totally. In fact, our sources, they actually reveal that even the ICO, they had their doubts. They called some of it tittle-tattle, basically saying, come on, this isn't exactly Woodward and Bernstein, right?
Exactly. So it makes you think, were they truly outmatched? Or was there a bit of, don't poke the bear going on, maybe a fear of political backlash?
Our deep dive suggests they might have been playing it a little safe. Don't get me wrong, they pushed for better practices, play nice, guys, but when it came to dropping the hammer, actually enforcing the rules, not so much.
And let's not forget the elephant in the room, right? Their hands were somewhat tied. The penalties for data breaches back then. A slap on the wrist for these media giants, hardly enough to make them sweat. The ICO, they knew this. They pushed for harsher punishments, arguing, look, if you want to hold the press accountable, make them think twice.
But here's where the plot thickens, right? Because it wasn't just the press pushing back against tougher rules. It was also some politicians. Turns out they weren't too keen on biting the hand that, well, writes about them. Talk about a conflict of interest.
Which brings us to the real issue at the heart of all this, the tangled web between the UK press and those in power. We're about to pull back the curtain on a relationship that shaped how information flows in this country. And let's just say, it's not always a pretty picture.
So if a massive investigation like Operation Motorman couldn't even scratch the surface of this influence, what's really going on behind those closed doors? Buckle up, because we're about to find out. So we've got the ICO over here trying to keep the press in check, but then you've got the lawmakers themselves, the ones writing the rules, pushing back. It's a bit of a head-scratcher, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, who's really steering the ship here? Our sources, they paint a picture of governments, one after another, wrestling with this whole press intrusion thing. They knew it was a problem, but the solution, often it was like, all right, let's just go with the flow here. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Self-regulation, press, police yourselves.
And well, we've all seen how that movie ends, right? It's like asking a fox to guard the henhouse. I mean, this is an industry famous for its, let's say, flexible relationship with the rules, especially if it means bagging that front page story.
And let's be frank, the press, especially those tabloids, they weren't exactly wallflowers. They could make or break a politician with a stroke of a pen. That kind of power casts a long shadow, even over the halls of Parliament.
It's like this high-stakes game, right? Politicians, they need the press to get their message out there, but they're also terrified of ending up on the wrong side of that headline. A bit of a love-hate relationship, maybe.
Oh, absolutely. And our sources, they pull back the curtain on some seriously eyebrow-raising tactics. Lobbying, backroom deals, you name it. Just imagine being a fly on the wall listening to these media bigwigs whispering in the ears of government officials, hey, maybe those data protection laws need a little loosening. Yeah, all in the name of press freedom, of course.
It really makes you wonder, were they truly looking out for the little guy, upholding those big democratic ideals, or were they just trying to keep the people holding the microphone happy? And speaking of keeping people happy, enter the Beastie Bee bid.
Picture this. Rupert Murdoch, Mr. News Corporation himself, already running a media empire, decides he wants the whole pie. We're talking the entirety of BSKB, a huge satellite broadcaster in the UK. And this wasn't just another business deal. Oh no, this was a power play, a seismic shift in the UK media landscape.
People were right to be worried, let me tell you. This wasn't just about what shows you could watch on the telly. This was about who controlled the narrative, who decided what you saw, what you read, what you believed. Imagine one voice, one perspective echoing across the airwaves. Not exactly a recipe for a healthy democracy, right?
Absolutely not. It raised some big, important questions about media plurality. Because a healthy democracy thrives on diverse voices, different perspectives, a marketplace of ideas. And that's what makes the Beastie saga so fascinating, so revealing. This wasn't just some boring boardroom battle. This was a drama unfolding on the front pages, in the halls of Parliament, even in those smoky backrooms we were just talking about.
It became this tangled web of political chess moves, intense lobbying, and these, frankly, questionable back channels between News Corps and the highest levels of government. Remember that chilling effect we talked about earlier? Now imagine you're a regulator tasked with making sure everyone plays by the rules, but you know that the very people you might be investigating, well, they've got the power to unleash a media firestorm against you.
Yeah, you got to wonder how that kind of pressure influences things. Can you truly make an impartial decision when the stakes are that high and the wolves are at the door?
And our sources, they point to a real lack of transparency throughout this whole process. It raises serious questions about bias, about undue influence. And remember, this isn't just about one media deal. This is about the rules of the game, the principles that govern how power operates in a democracy. What message does it send when those rules are bent, or worse, broken, to benefit the loudest voices, the deepest pockets?
It's easy to feel powerless when you see stuff like this, like you're stuck in a system rigged against you. But there are ways to fight back, to hold those in power accountable. And it starts by shining a light on these shadowy dealings, demanding transparency, and refusing to accept the status quo.
Exactly. Because if we, the public, don't demand better, who will? Up next, we'll explore some concrete steps toward a more transparent and accountable relationship between the press, the government, and most importantly, you, the citizen, stuck in the middle.
Well, we've waded into some pretty murky waters today, haven't we? It's like we've stumbled onto this set of House of Cards or something.
Right. All this power and influence, it can feel a million miles away from, our everyday lives. But the reality is it touches all of us, whether we realize it or not.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if these media giants can pull strings and influence decisions about something as important as data protection, then what does that say about their power to shape, well, everything we see and hear in the media? It's a bit unnerving, to say the least. You hit the nail on the head. And it all comes back to those two magic words, transparency and accountability. Because if we, the public, don't know how these decisions are being made, who's pulling the strings, who benefits, then we're basically navigating in the dark.
So how do we shine a light into those shadowy corners? Our sources, they offer a few interesting ideas. One that caught my eye was this whole idea of forcing politicians to come clean about their meetings, their chats with these big-time press figures.
Just imagine that. A world where we could see, black and white, just how often our elected officials are rubbing elbows with the Murdochs of the world. Now, it wouldn't reveal what they talked about, but it would give us a glimpse into those relationships, the ones forged behind closed doors.
It definitely makes you think, right? I mean, sure, some folks argue that it could scare off politicians, make them think twice about even talking to the press. But then again, wouldn't a little sunshine be a good thing? Don't we deserve to know who's whispering in our leaders' ears?
Exactly. Because transparency, it's not about airing dirty laundry for the fun of it. It's about making sure those in power, they're working for us, not for their own interests or for their buddies in high places. And speaking of power, that brings us back to the ICO.
Right. Remember those almost laughable fines we talked about earlier? A drop in the bucket for these media giants, like bringing a knife to a gunfight. Our sources, they suggest giving the ICO some real teeth, Real power to investigate, to prosecute, even when it comes to the press. We're talking bigger fines, maybe even criminal charges for the worst offenders.
Exactly, send the message. Data protection isn't a suggestion. It's the law. And everyone, from the smallest blogger to the biggest media mogul, plays by the same rules.
Of course, rules are only as good as the people enforcing them. And that takes guts. It takes politicians willing to stand up to powerful interests, even if it ruffles some feathers and maybe gets them some bad press along the way.
It's a tall order, no doubt. But it's not impossible. History is full of stories about folks who stood up, spoke out, and changed the game. And that's where you come in, dear listener.
Because this isn't just some abstract story about politicians and the press. It's about the information ecosystem we all live in. So what can you do? Be curious, be critical. Don't just swallow the information you're fed. Ask questions. Who is controlling the narrative? Whose voices are we hearing and whose are being drowned out? And maybe, most importantly, what are they not telling us? It's about recognizing the power of information and demanding that that power be used responsibly, ethically.
Well said. A healthy democracy relies on informed citizens who demand better from those in power. So keep digging, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a better, more transparent world. This has been your deep dive into the often murky, always fascinating world of data protection and the UK press. Until next time, stay vigilant.